Welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. Before we get going with the next helping of inspiring content, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this event to your screens. And don't forget you can access even more content from exclusive articles and interviews to all past and future events on demand, as well as templates and frameworks by becoming a PLA member. Head over to productledalliance.com for more info. Enjoy the next session.
Today, I'll be presenting. I'm Tony Preston. I'm the GM of Design and Digital at Yellowfin BI, and we also have Ivan Seau.
Hey everyone, nice to join a session today.
And Ivan's the Head of Product Marketing at Yellowfin BI. Okay, today we've broken it into two parts, spread between myself and Ivan. So I'll be taking you through part one, which is really the what and why of embedded and contextual analytics.
Yes, and I'm going to take part two, which really talks about how it really works, what you need to consider, and ultimately what it looks like for your product teams.
Out of today, we really hope that you understand some of the product and business benefits that can happen from embedding analytics into your product. We're going to talk through a little bit about creating amazing analytic experiences and some of the processes around that. Ivan's going to take you through how this all works and really helping you understand and find the right solution. So up until now, your product has probably been typically designed to do one particular job. I guess the start of this is we really want to shift that paradigm about how you think about analytics. So I guess think of your product's core functionality. It's nearly 100% chance that its core functionality is not analytics. It could be managing production, connecting people, resources. You might be involved in medical systems. And until now, you've probably most likely used data just for your own purposes. You've probably used it to help find insights that help you perform, the continuous delivery design and user research and prioritization that goes into creating your amazing product. And if you do have analytics in your product, is analytics a bolt-on or is it integrated as part of the product experiences? Are you reaching a point in your organization where your developers or your customer service team are spending probably way too much time creating bespoke reports for some of your bigger customers? And have you actually stopped for a moment and actually considered if analytics could actually offer you something unique to your competitors? I just wanted to start with a quick example that hopefully changes the paradigm of how you think about analytics and the role it could play in your product. If you have a look at the example I've got here, it's an Australian Football League tipping competition. Very similar in a way to your type of football, leather ball goes through some goals at the end. Like all tipping applications, there's the opportunity there to pick a winning team and a losing team. Traditionally, tipping apps were there to really just allow you to tip, go in, serve that sort of core functionality and then get out. If you look at most modern tipping applications now, though, they're completely surrounded with analytics. So if you look here, what we've done is I've actually coloured in yellow all the actual analytic content that sits around the core functionality of picking a winning team, which is the main workflow. And if you look at what's there, there's all sorts of lists, there's win-loss history, there's some betting information, there's a few charts and there's a few dials. Ultimately, that is all analytic content. And what's amazing about it is this analytic content can actually help guide someone into making a better, hopefully, tipping choice. And it will even allow someone who maybe has no knowledge of the game or the teams to actually partake in tipping rather than just guess, one side or the other. So as you can see, if you actually incorporate analytic content into key workflows, it can make a really big difference to how people might interact with your product or application. I'll give you another example here, and this one kind of ladders back to how analytics could offer you something new. I'm a really, really big fan of Scott Galloway, who is a guy that runs the Pivot podcast of many different podcasts, but he's very, very passionate about Twitter. I think he's a major shareholder there. And recently he actually said, one of the only ways Twitter can make money right now is with its data. And if you look at Twitter, unlike all the other big web applications like Facebook, Amazon, Google, their share price has skyrocketed over the last 10 years. Twitter has gone against that trend and has gone down. And it's mainly because they've still struggled after all this time to properly monetize. They're trying all sorts of different things like NFTs and all sorts of functionality, but it's really not sticking with their audience. And what they're saying, and what Scott's saying here, is that if we can actually make the analytics, which is available within the app, available to our big users, so say our users that are over 100,000, 1 million followers, and charge them a premium for providing the data that will either help guide them understand how they're performing against their peers. This would add immense value to Twitter. And you can imagine the type of people that would pay for that information. I can only think of big politicians, big brands. They would really want to know more about how they're performing on Twitter. And one of the little things we did here at Yellowfin was actually imagine what that could look like. So if you see now, what we've done is we've actually imagined at a global level how someone could look at their tweets and visually see, and this is just purely conceptually, but visually see how their different tweets, replies, impressions, engagements, follows, all that sort of stuff have performed over time. And can you imagine being able to filter that, being able to look at it in terms of how it's affected influence or growth or sentiment? Sentiment's a really big thing on Twitter. There's people out there that have built their brand by being purely against the grain in terms of what most people are thinking. And then bring that right down to a retrospective tweet level. This information is maybe available in various kind of components, but you need to go outside of Twitter. You can't see how your tweet has individual tweet has affected audience. You can't see which topics that individual tweet has ranked in. Very hard to measure the sentiment or see that. So again, a lot of this, if it's even available, needs to be done through multiple third-party apps. The problem is when you go to a third-party app, they're leaving your application. So you're losing that stickiness. And finally, imagine analytics at a tweet level. And that is if someone was going to write a tweet, what data could I, as the product developer, provide a Twitter user at the time of tweeting to guide the content of that tweet? If you're a brand, you might want to inject in particular sentiments or conversations or use particular words that are doing really well or tag in various people. There's just so much that could be done there rather than just throwing up an empty dialogue box. So hopefully that example and the one before it has changed the way you hopefully feel and think a little bit about the role that analytics could play in your product. Ultimately, you've got to come back to remember how important analytics or data actually is to your customers. They want it and they need it and they want to do stuff with it. And if they're not getting it out of your product or application, they will go elsewhere for it. Now, that might mean exporting it and then using other tools and therefore not spending time within workflows within your organization, or potentially migrating to a competitor that offers a better analytics experience. So I'd like you guys to think about data as an opportunity and think of the role analytics could play in your application in terms of an analytics first product. And I'm not saying you're changing the core functionality of your product, but it's about creating richer user experiences by delivering relevant, contextual analytics. So analytics at the point of decision making. We all build products or platforms that hopefully solve a real world problem. And we want to build an experience that enables our users to actually solve that problem in the best way possible. And I think this is where analytics can really come in and support that goal. And, the problem is all too often, and we're seeing it in some really, contemporary applications and companies, that analytics is actually seen as an afterthought. It's almost that mindset of let's throw some data at our users in a dashboard. And it can actually be so much more. And even thinking about analytics first, I think is a really good step in sort of stepping away potentially for where your competitors might lie, where they're focusing only on core functionality and improving core functionality. So enhancing of the value of the data and your software can happen in a number of different ways. Firstly, stickier user engagement. I touched on this a bit earlier. And this is a really big, business benefit, because obviously the longer someone spends in your application or software, the stickier it is to them, the more value it has to them, the more relevant it is to their day-to-day or working lives. From a business perspective, you really don't want to give your users a reason to leave your application and do something that you could facilitate within your software. This can give you a really, really good competitive advantage. Could this be a way to differentiate your product from your competitors? Think of the flip side, and this happens often. If they're not going to get it in your product, they might look elsewhere. And if one of your competitors offers it, it could be lost. This is a big, big risk to churn, and especially if the core functionality of your product is quite commoditized and doesn't differentiate that greatly from the competitors. It will actually come down to things like this. We actually have new customers come to us quite often, and they will, show us their product, and they will show us their competitors' products, analytics experience, and say, we are going to lose our biggest customer if we don't deliver this and deliver it quickly. So, if you're getting some of that, if you're getting kind of, notes from your biggest customers, this could be a key sign that analytics might actually need to be prioritized in your roadmap. As we talked about in the Twitter example, adding analytics can actually be a way to add additional revenue streams. We have a lot of customers that have their core functionality in their application, and they will then charge for analytics as an extra to their customers. So it is something that does have a measurable ROI. It's not just a kind of vanity project. For older software, it is actually a very fast and simple way to modernize. By embedding analytics, and Ivan's going to go more into how this can actually look, you can get to market very quickly with an analytics experience. And legacy software can reap the benefits of all sorts of new functionality quite quickly and easily. Again, another sign, if your developers are actually spending a lot of time looking at delivering bespoke reports, this could be a kind of key sign that you might need to prioritize this on your product roadmap, because obviously anytime they're spending on doing bespoke work like reporting is time that they're not spending on core functionality. And I touched on this one earlier again, but this is about delivering analytics to your users. Maybe currently you allow them to export the data or look at it in a separate dashboard and do things with it. Control that experience and make that an experience that, again, is sort of a pleasurable experience that helps them make better decisions within your software. Why wouldn't you do that? And you can, make the most of innovative tools like natural language query and all sorts of functionality that Ivan's actually going to talk about a bit later. So the big question, how do you do this? And, the first thing that I would kind of go is that it really, and look, if this is something that you can take away from today, is to shift that mindset. And if you think of a classic, user story, which around the functionality will be sort of, what do I need to do, I being the user, and shift that to what insights will enable me as the user to do what I need to do better within the product. And I think that is the shift that I'm hoping you'll all get from this, because I think that actually will help you realize the value that you can very quickly add by embedding analytics into your software and providing that sort of better experience. And here's a great example. I don't know if any of you have actually used Airbnb to not book a property, but rent out a property. But as you're actually setting up your property, all through the sign-up process and the specification process of that property, there's these little contextual bites of analytics that pop up. This is just one example here, as you're actually filling that form in. Now, that would be a very disjointed experience if you were to, say, go somewhere else in the application and look at a dashboard that said, properties that rent the most have these features. So it's about bringing it in and making it actually an integral part of the product. It's a really good example, this one. And we do struggle as humans with, hard decisions and decision fatigue. So the more that we can remove, or the more that we can guide people using data and lower that cognitive load, the far better people will feel and perform within your application. That's actually a really important point, because one of the risks of analytics is that people go a bit crazy and throw too much. But if you look at this page here. It's a really good example of just a little bit of contextual analytics here to guide one of the decisions that needs to be made in the workflow. Another thing that you could think about, and this is something that is often an afterthought, if a thought at all, is what data will be generated by people using your software that can be shared with that user or potentially others. That again is a big sort of shift in how a lot of people think about data. You saw it in the tipping app there. So the tipping app was showing you what other people are tipping. It's giving you a sort of a combined global feel of where people are at. That helps guide people. It shows sentiment. So there's things that could be done there without breaking privacy, for instance, that will actually show, the group effect and the halo effect of what other people are doing. I'm going to finish off this section just with a quick case study to show you something that we've done with one of our customers. They're actually a UK customer that really took the original brief was, guys, we've got this sort of patient event system. And what it does is it actually tracks and manages events in hospitals, so negative events. And it allows people to log it, to review the event, and to sort of push it through a workflow to resolution. So it starts with kind of a typical dashboard. And this is something that, you would actually expect within an application like this. You can see that there's 89 potential cases running, 44 have been confirmed. It's showing the workflow there through how many have been closed, how many have been rejected. It's allowing people to see incidents by type so they can see what's going on there. They can look at the approved remedies, so what's worked in terms of moving these through. If we scroll down the page a little bit, it's showing you the latest events and breaking down event types and time to resolution. Now that's sort of what you would expect from a dashboard. But here's where I think it gets really interesting. When someone actually goes on to log an incident, this was typically and was normally when we sort of started this project, just a form. So now it becomes a form where as people enter things through the drop downs, it actually starts filtering some of the analytic content. So as you can see, someone started filling out a form here. The incident is elder abuse. Sad, I know, but elders do get abused in hospitals. It's already filtered now through how many of these exist as potential cases, how many are confirmed, how many get closed, and how many get rejected. So already, the user is starting to see if there's any patterns. Will these end up taking a legal outcome, or will we be able to get to some sort of happy resolution? Providing some contextual charts around the time and location so they can start seeing if there's trends there. Are there particular wards that are over ranking in terms of elder abuse? And there's a line chart as well supporting it that shows the time to resolution. Okay, this is how long it's going to take, and start identifying patterns and start changing potentially the behaviours around how they will log these incidents. So now that you can see we're a bit later on in the workflow, that incident has been logged, and now it's time to sort of work out what actions the hospital want to take around that. So again, this tip here really is, one button is the workflow. But if we provide all sorts of contextual information around that, so we can see what remedies end up in what outcomes, what actions end up working, what actions don't, and then it can help guide the user to understand, if we actually book a mediation session here, this actually has a really, really good chance of closing the incident and getting to a happy outcome and not ending up going legal and ending up in all sorts of trouble. So this is kind of really groundbreaking for hospitals. And now if we look at showing all incidents, which is just a typical table, but we can actually use little bits of analytics in there to even guide how something's tracking. Now, if you look to the right of that table, you'll see there's a little spark line there. That's actually just tracking the mood of the patient, which is something that's collected throughout time. And as you imagine, with patients being handled by multiple healthcare professionals, it's very hard to sort of track how people are going. If you look at something here, you can see that, they're fluctuating, they're going down, they're going up. And interestingly, this in itself was something that the CEO of this organisation identified as something that could really help, intercept someone that was maybe tending towards depression or suicide. So if we're aware of how they're tracking, we can start providing different sort of outcomes to these people to make sure that they end up in a good place. So just to finish off the first part of this, creating analytics first products, some of the things you might want to think about, especially in the scoping phase here. So what decisions do your end users need to make to actually perform the tasks? This is something you should know really well, obviously. The next bit is, the important bit is that what data do you actually already have or could you collect to actually help better facilitate these decisions? And then what data could potentially be generated as they use the app to actually feed it back in and guide decision making. And for your sort of product and design team, when and where is the best way to show this data to ensure relevance? Because again, the big risk here is you just throw so much at the user that they don't know what to look at. So, smart design will bring it down and only show what's needed at the right point. And it's also worth keeping in mind, what is the analytic capability of your end users? You really don't want to deliver them an experience that, they may not, they might just be someone at a hospital that enters stuff into forms, right? So they're not used to looking at charts or tables. So maybe you'll have to represent some of the analytics as, English sentences. So really think about that end user and deliver them an experience that they'll actually be able to understand. So that concludes the first part of this webinar. I'm now going to throw to Ivan, who's going to really guide you through finding the right solution.
Thanks, Tony. Some great context behind the what and why from a business perspective. But let's just kind of change gears now and discuss a little bit on the solution front, from what you as a product leader need to consider, and what does this contextual analytics solution look like for you for an embedded sense. Now, there is always that question of build versus buy, which comes up from time to time, especially at the start. We know there's always a temptation to do it yourselves, especially if you have developers on your teams that possess some data skills. And since it's just reports and charts on a page, a lot of people think we can just build it ourselves, right? And we do have quite a few customers that actually thought that and initially tried to build it themselves, but eventually came back to us to embed. And why is that, right? So the main reason is because as projects grow in scope, the quickest way, and we found the least expensive way, and the customers as well, they found that out, is in order to achieve a modern analytics experience, while not jeopardizing your core product roadmap, the fastest way and the cheapest way to do that is actually to integrate a third-party embedded analytics platform. And you'll see why in a second. So if you're at this crossroads, then we think there are some key criteria to consider. And the first one is basically scalability. We think that's really important, especially important to understand how it plays into your solution, especially in a commercial software setting where usage can potentially skyrocket, right? So if you're thinking of building it yourselves, you'll have to plan for administration capabilities right up front, such as the ability for your solution to run on clusters, to support load balancing. The data experience needs to be scalable as well as personalization increases. For example, are you planning to personalize your analytics content for customers? Do different customers get to have different kinds of reports and dashboards? So what you're trying to really look for here is a vendor that not only offers direct querying for data as well, just thinking about the data side for a sec, but also allows for in-memory caching, right? So you can keep frequently queried data or access items in memory to accelerate performance. Again, particularly useful if you're offering, for example, scheduled bursts of reporting content to your entire customer base. And the data in these bursts could be unique to each customer as well. And also on a personalization front, depending on who they are, do your customers get unique content? Do they get unique displays, styling, and logos when they log in? So these are kind of the things you need to think about in terms of scalability. And the solution that you're looking for needs to work, in a multi-tenant cloud environment where you can not only deploy seamlessly, but you can scale seamlessly on demand as well. Now, the second one is really about data architecture. So data architecture that you decide And if that's the case, you're going to want to pay particular attention to, data sources, how it's stored, how does data move to your customers in the analytics chain. Is it going to be direct querying all the time? Potentially leveraging the investment that you've made, perhaps in a high-end analytic database. Or if you haven't done that investment, then it could potentially overwhelm your core product infrastructure. Or do you want to maybe keep some data in memory to provide a more consistent experience, right? Or maybe a mix of both, right? So maybe you want that flexibility. Then there's also the case of the semantic layer that sits across all of your analytic content. So you're going to want to design a business metadata layer across your data, which allows reports and dashboards and other source of content to be built quickly off your, for your customers or in self-service when people are tapping into those layers. So you want to allow that for your customers if you're really chasing the self-service front. But either way, in these scenarios, the point is to not recreate the universe each time there is an ad hoc query from a customer, right? So you want a governed, approved data model that's expansive and powers as much analytic content as you can. Then the third criteria is really extensibility. So we think this is really important when you want to add new functionality down the track or immediately after your first version when you release it, right? So as your solution grows over time, in order to allow you to take advantage of, for example, industry trends or to make your offering more competitive, the framework needs to be extensible. So some examples that we found customers asking for over time is, they would like to have new visualizations. They want to customize existing ones. They might want to create new ones. They might want to even slide a third-party visualization layer into the charting library to show new things. And we'll see an example of that later on as well. They might want to include new utilities and functions. So new navigation panels, new filters and selectors in your data, perhaps different kinds of buttons that do different things. Like for example, in Tony's example, you might want to, change your selection on different teams. You might want to change different things in your Airbnb form. So buttons with corresponding actions that enable customers to not just understand the data quickly, but to take action in your product as well. And it's any sort of data experience that are dreamt up by your product, content, and design teams. You want the framework there to be extensible to support and bring that idea into reality. So the key here is really any sort of analytics capability that you have within that solution should be able to be extended easily, again, either via APIs or via a plugin system as your customer needs and requests grow over time. And speaking about APIs and SDKs, software development kits, the APIs should be robust enough and the SDK should be transparent enough for embedding to help minimize the amount of coding that your developers need to undertake. So, not just the data experience that you're looking for, but for future data experiences. And we would say pay particular attention to this area, as really ultimately over time, this affects your overall total cost of ownership for the entire experience. So you want frameworks where common developer languages like HTML, JavaScript, CSS, things that developers already know, that the frameworks are using these languages instead of forcing a developer to learn a proprietary language in order to develop the experience that you want. So the SDKs available should really help your teams rapidly develop the interface that you want. The APIs should be open enough to allow low-code/no-code services to be built on top of these APIs, right? So this is actually a key trend in the market right now, known to some in the industry as composability, right? And the summary of it is product teams should be able to integrate granular features from an analytic solution that fit your core application, either with predefined low-code, no-code blocks or with some custom code. And that ultimately helps delivery become just another item that fits within your software development lifecycle, right? Or you want to go the other way and go, I want to embed a full-fledged self-service analytics experience into the product and simply white label that instead. So the API and SDK framework should, basically support all kinds of embedding scenarios that you like. We've already talked about 4 different criteria, which are fairly large, but again, when it comes to building unique data experiences that pushes a product forward, there's so many more aspects that your users don't see but proved to be crucial in terms of operationalizing analytics in your product. Again, I've touched on a few, but really there's about 12 we found. And these 12 criteria are critical in your build versus buy decision. And there's a great white paper that we've done on this called, how to select an embedded analytics product. That's available as part of this webinar as a downloadable. Or if you're already on our website, you can download that from our website on the resources page as well. Plenty of content on embedded there and contextual analytics as well if you want to sort of get informed in this paradigm. But again, feel free to go into that. So now I think it's time to, so Tony's taking you through the what and the why, I've sort of taken you through the how and some of the key things to consider. Then now we go into the art of the possible and what kind of data experiences can you create with an embedded analytics platform and hopefully with something like ours, right, in your product. So besides charts and dashboards, we found 3 innovations that are enabling product teams like yourselves to create data experiences that are unique to customers. So there's self-service analytics, right? So not just your usual report creation process, but allowing customers to ask questions in plain language to get the data and insights. I think we'll see an example of that pretty soon. Then there's also automated business monitoring. So where the solution continuously looks at your data and sends you personalized alerts once it finds something critical in your data, so a critical change, right? So rather than scouring a dashboard, looking for it, it kind of finds you automatically because it automatically finds and analyzes it and then presents it back to you. Then last but not least, we've got data storytelling. So really the last mile analytics where you get to have subject matter experts weigh in with expert commentary and narratives combined alongside your analytic content, which could be your charts and your data, and then just really helping provide the context that only humans can bring into your analytics, which is your ones and zeros, and making it consumable for everyone to understand what's happening and what to do next within your product. But rather than just talking about it, let's take a quick look at some of these experiences in action. All right, so what we have over here is a Licorio demo example. All right, so it is pretty much a procurement platform that is embedded Yellowfin and it's completely a white label, so you wouldn't actually recognize it from our original styling. So a user would then log into a system like this and treat it like it's as if it's your post application. A person's logging into it via the web, via the browser, or through an app. And then they will log in and give in and type in their credentials, and then they might even choose where they might want to log in the department. So this is actually a tenant, and usually that tenancy that's being part of that login would happen automatically, but we just wanted to show that in action. And this is what the business persona would see in this example. But before we go into that, let's just take a very quick look at the My Dashboards area. And this is what I was talking about when I said you could just simply embed the entire platform, the entire solution into your product, white labeled in a particular area that you want. And then a person or a user could go and look at the dashboards that they needed, and they could filter it, have the numbers change so they can deep dive into their insights, click on areas which might pull up different reports, different dashboards. And they might even engage in some self-service analytics by creating their own reports as well, or their own dashboards. So that's an experience that a lot of customers do, that aren't really thinking of contextual, but they just want analytics within their platform. And another thing that could happen is where we start going into the analytics first paradigm that Tony talked about, really inserting analytics that's contextual to the workflow and to the decision that a person needs to make when they're using a product. So we've got a few examples of this with varying levels of embeddability. So a key example is over here, this particular table orders is actually not Yellowfin's. This is actually part of the host application. A user is very much looking at the orders of the day and the quantity and volumes. But then this is transactional. And they could potentially want to have a look at the analytics, behind orders for, this month versus the last. What's the total orders, this month? What's the order value? And what are the top 5 things that are selling the best in this category? So we've included that as charts over here that were built in Yellowfin, right? So this entire block has been built in Yellowfin as a report. and the interactions have been widened to the actual click within the host application. And what I mean is a business user could be looking at this and go, all right, so let's have a look at the category of whiskeys and apply. And that's part of their day-to-day action. So they click on apply. Not only does the transactions update, because that's what they are looking at within the product, but the numbers all follow suit and provide that context behind that selection that was just made. And then they can go ahead and look at whiskeys and go, let's have a look at the drill down report behind this particular bar right here, behind that selection. So super easy to create. Everything is built drag and drop within the Elephant platform. The embedding operation is simply one JavaScript line in the API, and the parameters are being fed by the click events that are happening at the top over here. So you're just simply feeding in filter values as part of that URL. Let's move down over here and have a look at a different kind of embedding as well, where it starts getting really contextual because it's inserted straight into your transaction display. An example is looking at store orders. The user could be looking at the order value in units on a per store basis. They click on it, then the dashboard loads and gives them the lowdown behind the Windsor Heights store. So you can see that click has immediately influenced the generation of the dashboard. And again, the entire dashboard that you see over here has been created within the platform and is simply called upon via an API to load that upon that click. Another example, as we keep going, is the category tab. So for example, if I click on whiskeys over here, is again pulling a separate dashboard, which is all about whiskeys. But here you start to see the extensibility that I talked about really kicking in. For example, we've embedded a bottle chart, which is really not part of our native chart, right? We don't have charts that share bottles. But we've included a JavaScript chart that has been pluginized into our product. The users can then use that when they're creating content and feed that into the data, and you can see the data being visualized in a really bespoke way over here. And if you go to the bottom here, this is where Tony was really talking about the action-based stuff, right? So this particular report is really folding in some data science capability, where it's forecasting based on the inventory levels. What are the bottles that are forecasted to run out pretty soon? And then give them the option of ordering more before they run into out of stock situations. So clicking on confirm, the user can then go, the computer has offered to forecast that we need 28 units. And then you can go, what, let's just be safe, let's order 30 units and then update the order. And really you can see what the user has done is they've looked at the analytics, they've understood what's happening, and then the analytics portion has allowed them to take an action against what insights that they've gotten. And then we've also have low code, no code options over here in the form of action buttons that allows you to trigger that seamless workflow into other systems. And in this case, it's ordering more bottles in other systems, but via your host product, right? So these are some of the things that could open up in terms of interactions for your users to play with and really kind of bring more value to the product that you have. And Tony was really talking about natural language querying, self-service analytics. What does that look like? Well, based on insights that a person looks at, in the screen, they could immediately, ask a question in a very ad hoc manner and use natural language querying to do that. You can ask a question, and we call this guided NLQ, where they are looking at, say in this case, it's all about liquor data. So they're going to ask questions and go, again, you can ask any question that you want. We're going to ask a very simple one where we go, let's look at the sales amount and the units sold. And look at this from different categories. So for example, I'm going to choose product categories, and just for brevity's sake, let's look at this for all time, okay? And then it's basically going to ask this question in plain English, and it's going to generate that result set in a chart immediately. So I'm completely bypassing the whole report builder, chart builder process, where it could trip up people with low data literacy skills. But everyone knows how to ask a question, in English, right, or in the languages that they have. And this experience over here is guided by the platform. So you can see as I was typing through the question, the menus updated based on what I was trying to ask, and then giving me options on what to do. And this really helping a user along, in terms of their own self-serve. And as Tony says, if you offer this to your customers, then you could be saving so much effort and cycles from your own customer support teams, creating custom reports for clients and allowing your clients to create these things by themselves in a really quick way and easy way as well. All right, so that's happening. And then you can ask that in an ad hoc manner. You can save that as a report straight away, or you can just bring that result set straight into a dashboard if you like. And then moving on to the automated business monitoring section, which you see over here. This entire thing is done by REST API, right? So you're simply grabbing the signals. This is what we call them, which are critical changes in your data that's happening that immediately brings those insights to the users. So, for example, there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of the different brands. Johnnie Walker has had a great year. It spiked in October. Rather than looking at a dashboard for it, it kind of finds a critical change and then immediately alerts you of it, and then immediately provides you that automated analysis as well. So, for example, what was responsible for that spike in October? And then you ultimately see that these charts have been automatically created for you based on key driver analysis, the most influential attributes. So basically, top 3 categories with premium, value, and ultra premium, described with the natural language text on the right here. Out of thousands and hundreds of products, Johnnie Walker was really killing it in terms of sales, and the top 3 products were the White Walker, Red, and Walker Black, right? And selling in large stores. So again, saving the users a lot of time in terms of doing their own analysis and then surfacing that up to the user with automation. And these are all the value adds that potentially fall into your analytics first product and commercialize that in unique ways. And last but not least is really the last mile analytics, right? So great to see the numbers, great to see the insights, but what does it all mean, right? So subject matter experts can then engage what we call data storytelling and really offer their own expert narratives and commentary alongside the data and the charts that you have tapped into your product data. So this is something that a person could do to provide context. And in this particular example, it explains that Johnnie Walker sales spiked in October because HBO and Game of Thrones had a bit of a collaborative campaign that pushed the Johnnie Walker White Walker whiskey, and powered with the popular pop culture TV show. Then everyone went to the large stores and chains and got themselves a bottle of that whiskey, right? So things that probably wouldn't have been obvious if you just looked at the data, but again, having that narrative there to explain the context is great. And again, this is something that potentially commercialize as part of a package that you offer to your customers, right? So just a few ideas on how you can actually really bring forward your analytics, in terms of including that within your product, commercializing it, bringing more value, and then creating things that ultimately your competitors can't do. I'm just going to stop right there and kind of bring it back to the presentation over here, and really that's the end. We see there's quite a few questions that have been asked in the question box. Feel free to keep asking. We've got people within the chat that's answering them. But really, if our team does not get to your questions fast enough at the end of this webinar, feel free to tweet it at us. Tony's got a Twitter account at Tony Kristen. I've got one at IVCL. Always happy to answer those questions, any that you might have from a product or a better analytics perspective. But really, if this session has been interesting for you, and we hope that it has been, feel free to come to our website at yellowfinbi.com. There'll be a resources section there. We've got super rich content, not just white papers, but blogs and videos that are all talking about creating beautiful data experiences with embedded analytics, with contextual analytics, and we even have a maturity model white paper there that allows you to look at it and kind of ascertain where your organization is on the embedded maturity curve, and then really just look into a lot of content to help you along that journey. So, again, happy to be part of this conversation with Tony and myself. Thanks for having us, and have a great rest of your day.